Socialism is experiencing a resurgence in America. Young people embrace it. Progressive politicians campaign on it. Major movements organize around it. Democratic Socialists of America has tens of thousands of members. Polls show majorities of young Americans view socialism favorably. This should terrify anyone who knows history. Socialism has been tried repeatedly across the world for over a century. Every single time it has produced poverty, oppression, and death. The body count of socialism exceeds 100 million people. Yet somehow it's being repackaged and sold to a new generation as compassionate, progressive, and morally superior to capitalism. This is insane. It's like watching people enthusiastically embrace a poison that killed everyone who drank it before, convinced that this time will be different. Today, we're going to talk about what socialism actually is, the complete history of socialist experiments and their catastrophic failures, why socialism always fails, why it appeals to modern voters despite this history, how progressives are rebranding socialism for American consumption, and what we must do to stop this ideology before it destroys America like it's destroyed every nation that embraced it. This is going to challenge people who think socialism sounds compassionate. People who believe Scandinavian countries are socialist. People who think democratic socialism is different from regular socialism. People who've been taught that real socialism has never been tried. All of that is wrong, dangerously wrong, and we're going to prove it with facts and history. Let's get into it.
Courage, compassion, faith, freedom, truth. Welcome to Courage in the Darkness with your host, Philip Roberts. It's time to awaken America.
Let me start by defining socialism, because the left deliberately obscures what it means. Socialism is an economic and political system where the means of production, factories, businesses, resources, are owned collectively rather than privately. Government controls the economy. Central planning replaces market forces. Karl Marx defined it as the transitional stage between capitalism and communism. The workers seize the means of production from the capitalist class. The state controls and redistributes wealth. Private property is abolished or severely restricted. That's socialism. Government or collective ownership of the economy, central planning, redistribution of wealth, elimination of private enterprise. Socialism and communism are related but distinct. Marx envisioned socialism as the intermediate stage. Workers overthrow capitalists and establish state control of the economy. Then, once scarcity is eliminated and people are properly educated, the state withers away and you achieve communism, a stateless, classless society of pure equality. In practice, socialism never transitions to communism. The state never withers away. It grows more powerful and oppressive. The promised equality never materializes. Instead, you get totalitarianism, poverty, and mass death. So when people defend socialism by saying, "I'm not talking about communism," they're missing the point. Socialism is the path to communism. And even when it doesn't reach communism, socialism itself produces catastrophe. Let me address common misconceptions. Socialism is not social programs. Having welfare, public schools, or infrastructure doesn't make a country socialist. Every capitalist country has some social programs. That's not socialism. Socialism is not progressive taxation. Taking more from the rich to fund government isn't socialism. It might be bad policy, but it's not socialism unless the goal is collective ownership of production. Socialism is not Scandinavian countries. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, these are capitalist countries with large welfare states. They have private property, free markets, private enterprise. They're not socialist, and their leaders explicitly reject that label. True socialism means government control of the economy, central planning, abolition of private enterprise. That's what we're discussing. Socialists claim there are different types of socialism: democratic socialism, market socialism, libertarian socialism, each supposedly different from the failed experiments of the past. This is a shell game. The fundamental principle remains the same: collective ownership and control of the economy. Whether you vote for it or oppose it by force, whether you allow some market elements or control everything centrally, the core is the same. And every variety has been tried. Every variety has failed. There's no magic form of socialism that works. The ideology itself is flawed. Socialism promises equality: no more rich and poor, no more exploitation of workers by capitalists. Everyone contributes according to their ability and receives according to their need. A fair, just society where wealth is shared. It sounds appealing. That's why people keep falling for it. Who doesn't want equality and fairness? But the promise is a lie. Socialism doesn't produce equality, it produces universal poverty. It doesn't eliminate exploitation, it makes government the exploiter. It doesn't create justice, it destroys freedom and prosperity. The promise is utopian fantasy. The reality is dystopian nightmare. Let me walk through the history of socialism. Every experiment, every failure, every body count. Because people need to understand this isn't theoretical. It's documented historical fact. Share this with your Democrat friends. The Bolsheviks seized power in Russia in 1917. Promising peace, land, and bread, they established the first socialist state. What followed was 70 years of horror. Lenin and the Bolsheviks immediately began seizing private property and nationalizing industry. They eliminated private enterprise. They centrally planned the economy. They redistributed wealth primarily to the Communist Party elites. The result? Economic collapse, famine, civil war. Lenin created the Cheka, secret police, who executed thousands of enemies of the people. Class warfare, gulags, political prisoners, all in the name of building socialism. Stalin took over in the 1920s and escalated everything. Forced collectivization of agriculture killed millions through deliberate starvation. The Holodomor in Ukraine alone killed 4 to 7 million people. The Great Purge executed hundreds of thousands more. The Gulag system imprisoned millions in labor camps where they died of exposure, starvation, and brutality. Total death toll under Soviet socialism, 20 to 25 million people. Economic stagnation, technological backwardness, complete absence of political freedom. The state controlled everything. What you could own, where you could work, what you could say, where you could travel. The Soviet Union finally collapsed in 1991, a failed state that couldn't feed its people or compete economically with the capitalist West. 70 years of socialism produced nothing but misery and death. Mao Zedong established the People's Republic of China in 1949. He implemented socialism even more aggressively than Stalin. The Great Leap Forward, Mao's plan to rapidly industrialize China through collectivization and central planning, was history's greatest man-made disaster. Forced collectivization destroyed agricultural production. Central planning created absurd directives like peasants smelting steel in backyard furnaces, producing useless metal while crops rotted in fields. The result? The Great Chinese Famine. 45 million people died between 1958 and 1962. Starved to death, worked to death in labor camps, beaten to death for hiding food. Parents eating their kids. The worst famine in human history caused entirely by socialist policies. Then came the Cultural Revolution. Mao mobilized youth to destroy traditional culture and purge counter-revolutionaries, teachers, intellectuals, religious leaders, and anyone with education or property were targeted. Millions killed. Historical artifacts destroyed. Education system collapsed. The total death under Mao's socialism? 65 million people. That's more than World War II and World War I combined. All in the name of building socialism. And China only began prospering when they abandoned socialist economics in favor of market reforms. Modern China is authoritarian and communist politically, but economically, it's moved towards capitalism. That's why their economy grew. They stopped being socialists. Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge took power in Cambodia in 1975. They implemented the purest form of socialism ever attempted: agrarian communism. They evacuated cities, executed intellectuals, professionals, anyone with education. They literally killed people for wearing glasses, a sign of being educated and therefore counter-revolutionary. They forced everyone into agricultural communes. They abolished money. They attempted to create year zero, complete erasure of previous society. In 4 years, they killed 25% of Cambodia's population. 2 million people. Executed, starved, worked to death. The killing fields are physical evidence of socialist ideology taken to its logical conclusion. After World War II, the Soviet Union imposed socialism on Eastern Europe. East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, all became socialist states. The result? Economic stagnation, political oppression, people risking death to escape to capitalist West Germany. The Berlin Wall wasn't built to keep capitalists out. It was built to keep socialists in. Because people were fleeing socialism for capitalism. When the Iron Curtain fell in 1989 to 1991, the contrast was stark. West Germany was prosperous and free. East Germany was impoverished and oppressive. Same people, same culture, different economic systems. Capitalism produced prosperity. Socialism produced poverty. Fidel Castro established socialism in Cuba in 1959. 65 years later, Cuba remains impoverished. Castro seized private property, nationalized industry, implemented central planning, promised equality and prosperity. What did he deliver? Shortages of everything, rationing, poverty, political prisoners, no freedom of speech or movement, people fleeing on rafts, risking death to reach capitalist America. Modern Cuba has two economies, one for tourists with hard currency, one for Cubanos with worthless pesos. There are shortages of basic goods. Doctors drive taxis because they can't survive on government wages. Buildings crumble. Technology is decades old. Progressives point to Cuban healthcare and education. Those systems are mediocre at best and came at the cost of freedom and prosperity. Meanwhile, people die trying to escape this paradise. Venezuela was once the wealthiest country in South America, rich in oil. Hugo Chavez began implementing 21st century socialism in 1999. His successor, Maduro, continued. They nationalized industries, implemented price controls, redistributed wealth, printed money, all standard socialist policies. The result? Complete economic collapse. Hyperinflation over 1,000,000% at its peak. Shortages of food, medicine, electricity, water, people eating pets and garbage, millions fleeing from the country, political oppression and violence against protesters. This happened in our lifetime. We watched socialism destroy a wealthy country in less than 20 years. Yet progressives still claim socialism works. North Korea remains the world's most totalitarian socialist state. The government controls everything. Private property doesn't exist. Central planning dictates all economic activity. The result? Repeated famines killing millions. Total absence of freedom. Concentration camps. Public executions. 3 generations of families punished for one person's crime. Poverty so severe that malnutrition has stunted the population's growth. North Koreans are on average several inches shorter than South Koreans. Meanwhile, South Korea, same people, same peninsula, capitalist system, is one of the world's most prosperous nations. The contrast couldn't be more clear. Capitalism produces prosperity. Socialism produces starvation and tyranny. The list continues. Nicaragua, Mozambique, Ethiopia, Angola, Albania, Yugoslavia, Laos, Vietnam. Well, Vietnam before the market reforms. Every African socialist experiment, every single one produced poverty, oppression, and often mass death. Not a single exception. Do you notice the pattern? Socialists seize power, promising equality and prosperity. They nationalize industry. They redistribute wealth. They centrally plan the economy, and every time, the result is economic collapse, political oppression, and mass death. This isn't coincidence. This isn't bad implementation. This is socialism producing its inevitable results. Socialism fails for fundamental reasons rooted in economics and human nature. Let me explain why the ideology itself is fatally flawed. Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises identified this in 1920. In a market economy, prices communicate information. They tell producers what to make, how much to make, how to allocate resources efficiently. Prices emerge from millions of individual transactions, supply and demand. No central authority sets them. They contain more information than any human could process. The aggregated knowledge and preferences of every market participant. Socialism eliminates price signals by abolishing markets, central planners must decide what to produce, how much, using what resources, from whom. But they have no information to make these decisions rationally. Should you produce more shoes or more bread? More tractors or more cars? Should resources go to steel production or textile production? Without prices, you can't know. You're guessing. The result is inevitable shortages and surpluses. Too much of what people don't want, too little of what they need, chronic inefficiency and waste. This is why socialist countries always have shortages and lines. The central planners can't possibly know what millions of people need. Markets can. Socialism can't. Capitalism rewards productivity. If you work hard, innovate, create value, you profit. You keep the fruits of your labor. This incentivizes effort and innovation. Socialism eliminates this incentive. If your compensation is the same regardless of your effort, why work hard? If the state takes everything you produce and redistributes it, why be productive? The answer is, you don't. People under socialism work less, produce less, innovate less, because they have no incentive to do otherwise. This is human nature. People respond to incentives. Remove the incentive to be productive, and productivity collapses. Every socialist country has experienced this. Workers pretending to work while the state pretends to pay them. Friedrich Hayek explained this. Knowledge is dispersed throughout society. Millions of individuals each have specific knowledge about their circumstances, needs, and their opportunities. Markets aggregate this dispersed knowledge through price signals. Central planners can't access this knowledge. They're making decisions with a fraction of the necessary information. This is why socialist central plans always fail. The planners don't know what farmers need, what factories can produce, what consumers want, what innovations are possible. They're operating blind. Markets work because they harness the knowledge of everyone. Socialism fails because it replaces dispersed knowledge with central ignorance. Socialism concentrates enormous power in the state. Government controls the economy, which means it controls people's livelihoods, which means it controls people. This power inevitably corrupts. This power inevitably gets abused. People who seek power, the worst people, rise to the top of the socialist system. And once there, they use that power to enrich themselves and oppress others. There's no check on this power. In capitalism, if one company abuses you, you can work for another. Under socialism, if the state abuses you, you have no recourse. The state is employer, landlord, food provider, everything. You're completely dependent and powerless. This is why every socialist state becomes tyrannical. The concentration of power makes tyranny inevitable. Socialism promises equality but delivers the opposite. It creates two classes: the party elite who control everything and everyone else who has nothing. Party officials live in luxury with special stores, housing, healthcare. Everyone else stands in bread lines. This happened in every socialist country. The inequality under socialism is worse than under capitalism. At least under capitalism, anyone can potentially become wealthy through work and innovation. Under socialism, only party loyalty and political connections matter. Capitalism creates wealth through innovation, efficiency, and productivity. Competition drives improvements. Profit motive incentivizes creating value. Socialism destroys wealth. It takes what capitalism created and redistributes it until nothing remains. It produces nothing new because it can't. No incentives, no information, no innovation. Socialist countries always live off accumulated capital from previous capitalist periods. Once that's consumed, they collapse into poverty because socialism doesn't create, it only consumes. Socialism assumes humans are selfless, cooperative, and rational. That given proper education and conditions, people will work hard for the collective good with no personal incentive. This is a utopian fantasy. Humans are fallen. We're selfish. We respond to incentives. We need rewards for effort and consequences for laziness. Capitalism works with human nature. It channels selfishness into productive ends. You profit by serving others' needs. Socialism fights human nature. It tries to remake humanity. And when humans won't cooperate, socialism resorts to force. That's why socialist states are always tyrannical, because the ideology requires people to behave contrary to human nature, and force is the only way to make them comply. Given this catastrophic history, why are young Americans embracing socialism? Why does it appeal despite overwhelming evidence of failure? Young people face real economic challenges: student debt, housing costs, stagnant wages, difficulty achieving the prosperity their parents had. This creates resentment and desire for change. Socialism offers answers. The system is rigged. Capitalism is exploiting you. We need radical change. It's the wrong answer. Capitalism isn't the problem. Government intervention in capitalism is. But it's an appealing answer to people struggling economically. Schools don't teach the history of socialism honestly. Students learn about the Great Depression and robber barons, but not about the Holodomor and killing fields. They're taught that socialism is about fairness and equality. They're not taught about the 100 million dead. They don't learn that every socialist experiment ended in failure. This ignorance makes them vulnerable to socialist propaganda. They don't know what happened last time because nobody taught them. Humans have innate sense of fairness. Seeing others with more while you struggle creates resentment. Socialism promises to fix this. Everyone equal. No one left behind. This appeals to young people's idealism. They want fairness. They want justice. Socialism promises both. They don't understand that socialism's equality is equality of poverty, not prosperity. They don't understand that capitalist inequality produces overall prosperity, while socialist equality produces universal misery. When you point to socialist failures, defenders say, that wasn't real socialism. Real socialism hasn't been tried. Those countries did it wrong. This is absurd. If your ideology produces catastrophe every single time it's tried, your ideology is the problem. We'll do it better isn't convincing when the track record is 100% failure, but this argument lets people continue believing in socialism despite evidence. They convince themselves that their version will be different. Socialists claim moral superiority. They care about poor people. They want fairness. Capitalists are greedy and selfish. This appeals to people's desire to be good. Supporting socialism makes you feel compassionate. Opposing it makes you seem heartless. Never mind that capitalism has lifted billions out of poverty while socialism has produced only misery. The moral posturing is effective. Progressives constantly point to Scandinavian countries as proof socialism works. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, prosperous socialist paradise. This is completely wrong. These countries aren't socialist. They're capitalists with large welfare states. Private property, free markets, private enterprise. Their leaders explicitly reject being called socialist. Their prosperity comes from capitalism, not socialism. The welfare programs they afford are funded by capitalist wealth creation. But this myth persists because progressives need examples of successful socialism. So they lie and call capitalist countries socialists. Movies, TV, music, social media, popular culture embraces socialist messages. Celebrities promote socialist politicians. Social media influencers make socialism seem cool and progressive. Young people are influenced by culture. When their favorite celebrities endorse socialism, they're more likely to support it. When media presents socialism sympathetically and capitalism critically, they absorb those messages. Socialism promises free stuff, free healthcare, free college, free housing, student debt forgiveness, universal basic income. This appeals to people, especially young people with limited resources. Who doesn't want free stuff? They don't understand that nothing is free. Someone pays through confiscatory taxation, economic destruction, and loss of freedom. But the promise of free stuff is politically powerful. American progressives know they can't sell traditional socialism, so they're rebranding it. Let me show you how. Democratic socialism. Bernie Sanders and AOC call themselves Democratic Socialists. This supposedly means socialism achieved through voting rather than revolution. But the economic policies are still socialist. Government control, wealth redistribution, nationalization of industries. The only difference is you're voting for your own enslavement. Democratic socialism is still socialism. It requires massive government power. It still destroys prosperity. It's just marketed better. Green New Deal. This is socialism disguised as environmentalism. The proposals include government control of energy production, massive wealth redistribution, guaranteed jobs, guaranteed income, healthcare, housing. That's socialism. Central planning, government control of the economy, elimination of private enterprise in the energy and other sectors. They just call it environmentalism to make it palatable. But read the actual proposals. It's socialism with green branding. Modern monetary theory, MMT, claims government can print unlimited money to fund programs without inflation or economic consequences. This is economic nonsense that provides theoretical justification for unlimited socialist spending. If government can print money without consequences, then everything is affordable. Free healthcare, free college, free everything. Just print more money. This is obviously false. Printing money causes inflation and economic collapse. Venezuela proved it recently. But MMT gives socialists permission to ignore economic reality. Equity over equality. Modern progressives shifted from equality to equity. Equality means equal opportunity and treatment. Equity means equal outcomes through forced redistribution. This is socialism, taking from some to give to others to achieve equal outcomes. Government determining who gets what based on identity categories. Same socialist policies, new terminology. Stakeholder capitalism. This rebrands socialism for corporations. Instead of businesses serving shareholders and customers, they should all serve stakeholders, workers, communities, environment, society. This means government forcing businesses to pursue social goals rather than profit. It's economic control disguised as corporate responsibility. It's socialism implemented through regulatory pressure rather than direct nationalization. But the effect is the same. Government controlling business decisions. Universal Basic Income, UBI, is government paying everyone regardless of work. This is wealth redistribution and dependence creation. Core socialist goals. It requires massive taxation and wealth seizure. It creates permanent dependency on the government. It removes incentive to work. It's socialism through welfare expansion. Medicare for all. This is nationalization of healthcare. Government taking over 20% of the economy. Central planning of healthcare decisions. Elimination of private insurance. That's socialism. Government ownership and control of production. They just call it Medicare for all to make it sound like expanding a popular program rather than socialist takeover. The rebranding success. These rebranding efforts are working. Young people supporting these policies without realizing they're supporting socialism. They think democratic socialism is different. They think Green New Deal is about environment. They think Medicare for all is just healthcare reform. They don't recognize these are socialist policies that will produce the same catastrophic results socialism always produces. That's the danger. Socialism is being implemented incrementally under different names, and people are accepting it because they don't want to recognize what it is. So, how do we stop socialism from destroying America? What do we got to do? What must be done? Education. We must teach the true history of socialism. Every failure, every atrocity, every bounty count. Students need to know about the Holodomor, the Great Leap Forward, the killing fields, the gulags. They need to understand what socialism produces. Parents must teach their children. Churches must teach their congregations. We must counter the propaganda in schools and media with truth. Defend capitalism. We gotta aggressively defend capitalism and free markets, not apologize for them. Defend them. Capitalism has lifted billions out of poverty, created unprecedented prosperity, enabled technological innovation, extended lifespans, improved living standards globally. Every measure of human flourishing improves under capitalism and declines under socialism. We must make this case boldly. Expose the lies. We've got to expose progressive lies about socialism. Scandinavia isn't socialist. Democratic socialism is still socialism. Free stuff isn't free. Every time they make a false claim, we must correct it publicly. Don't let lies stand unchallenged. Political opposition. We must oppose socialist politicians and policies. Vote them out. Primary out Republicans who compromise with socialism. Support candidates who understand economics and defend capitalism. Make socialist policies politically toxic. Economic freedom. We must expand economic freedom, not restrict it. Lower taxes, reduce regulations, eliminate government intervention in markets. Prosperity is the best defense against socialism. When people thrive under capitalism, they're less vulnerable to socialist appeals. Address the real problems. Young people supporting socialism have real grievances. Economic struggles are real. We must address them, but with capitalist solutions, not socialist ones. Education costs, reduce government intervention driving up costs. Housing costs, reduce zoning restrictions and regulations. Stagnant wages, reduce taxes and regulations strangling growth. Capitalism can solve these problems. We must show how. Cultural restoration. We must rebuild culture of work, responsibility, and virtue. Socialism thrives on envy, resentment, and entitlement. Teach children to work hard, to take responsibility, to create value, to earn rather than demand. These values immunize against socialism. Mockery. Socialist policies are absurd. We should mock them, ridicule the idiocy of central planning, make fun of people who think printing money creates wealth, point out the obvious contradictions. Mockery is effective. It prevents bad ideas from gaining prestige and respectability. Socialism is the deadliest ideology in human history. Over 100 million people have died under socialist regimes. Every socialist experiment has ended in poverty, oppression, and collapse. This isn't debatable. It's documented historical fact. Soviet Union, Communist China, Cambodia, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, every single one failed catastrophically. Socialism fails because it fights economic reality and human nature. It eliminates price signals needed for rational economic calculation. It removes incentives needed for productivity. It concentrates power that inevitably corrupts. It tries to remake humanity and uses force when people won't comply. Yet socialism has experienced resurgence in America. Young people support it. Progressive politicians promote it. It's being rebranded as democratic socialism, Green New Deal, Medicaid for all, same failed ideology, new marketing. This must be stopped. If socialism is implemented in America, it'll produce the same results it's produced everywhere else. Economic collapse, loss of freedom, misery and death. We must teach the truth. Defend capitalism, expose socialist lies, oppose socialist policies, rebuild culture of work and responsibility. 2 Thessalonians 3 verse 10 says, "For even when we're with you, we would give you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." That's biblical economics. Work and productivity are requirements, not options. Those who work should benefit from their labor. Those who won't work shouldn't be supported by those who do. The principle is the foundation of capitalism and the death of socialism. Capitalism rewards work and productivity. Socialism severs the connection between effort and reward, between work and provision. When you eliminate the requirement to work, when you promise to feed people regardless of productivity, you create dependence and destroy prosperity. That's what socialism does. It removes the biblical mandate to work and replaces it with entitlement. The result is exactly what Scripture predicts: collapse. Because humans are created to work. We're designed to be productive. Removing that requirement doesn't liberate, it destroys. Socialism violates God's design for human flourishing. It rebels against the principle that if you don't work, you don't eat. It promises to provide for everyone regardless of contribution, and it fails every single time because it fights against how God designed reality to function. We must reject socialism, embrace capitalism, defend economic freedom, teach work and responsibility, build prosperity through productivity, not redistribution. The alternative is repeating the catastrophic failures of the past, and this time, it'll be America that collapses under socialism's inevitable consequences. Don't let that happen. Fight for capitalism. Defend freedom. Reject socialism in all its rebranded forms. The choice is prosperity or poverty, freedom or tyranny, capitalism or socialism. Choose wisely. If you found this episode helpful, please share it, like it, and subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. And if you want to support my work, consider becoming a member on Patreon at Courage in the Darkness, where you can get free merchandise and access to all of my shows. Thank you for listening. Reject socialism, embrace capitalism, work hard. God bless.